My name is Siobhan and I have direct experience of child sexual abuse. I want you to know that there is a massive deception in our child protection framework. If you're a teacher and you work in a school and one day you walk in on your colleague actively abusing a child, you would imagine that you have some sort of legal obligation to report what you've seen. The reality is that you don't. Reporting of child abuse in this country remains only discretionary. This means that abuse that could have been reported actually is allowed to continue. Campaigners in favour of mandatory reporting are up against one big institutional obstacle, which is the NSPCC. In a recent consultation, they rejected mandatory reporting based on the following points. Children are discouraged from reporting abuse because of concerns about being catapulted into criminal investigation. Now, I can only speak for myself, but my biggest concern as someone who was actually being abused was for the abuse to stop. What's the alternative then, NSPCC? I mean, the perpetrator is going to be allowed to continue abusing the child, and you never know for sure whether as a child you're the only victim. Heightened reporting levels overwhelm the child protection system. Well, if you have, say, 1,000 more reports, and of those 100 lead to a perpetrator being prosecuted and unable to abuse children anymore, then I think that that's worth it. Heightened reporting levels do not lead to an increase in the capacity of services to respond to need. In my mind, this is another issue. This is about reforming the child protection system itself rather than whether or not we should have mandatory reporting. There should be a willingness to acknowledge the scope and how widespread the issue is rather than say we don't want to know, don't tell us how many kids are being abused because we can't respond to it. Mandatory reporting is driven by the process rather than focusing on the needs of the child. I would say that the first and foremost need of the child is for the abuse to be stopped. Finally, mandatory reporting fails to address the underlying reasons why individuals do not report abuse. And if anything, it empowers professionals to know what their job is and to understand their obligations fully.
My name is Tom Perry. I was the first complainant in the Caldecott School child sexual abuse scandal. The likelihood of many people spotting child abuse or discovering child abuse or witnessing child abuse is incredibly remote. So what are you reporting? You are reporting a suspicion. Now imagine that, surrounded by colleagues at Hillside First School in Weston-super-Mare, where Nigel Leet abused for 15 years. 30 incidents they spotted, 11 were reported. The serious case review never asked why or what happened to the other 19 occasions when staff noticed something but didn't report them. The failure is that we don't have mandatory reporting. That's it in simple terms. 90% of the Americas has mandatory reporting, 86% of Europe. We're rather out of step with Europe. 77% of Africa and 72% of Asia have some form. If we are going to say that we're not going to introduce an effective child protection system because we're worried about the effect of the services and agencies being overwhelmed, then we have to accept that the consequence is that we're leaving children to be abused.
I found a comment left on my blog some years after the abuse ended, which was actually left by my teacher. And she told me that one day at school I had been acting strangely, and when she asked what was wrong, I said I couldn't tell anybody. I said that it was a secret and that I didn't want to be left alone with my father. At this point, alarm bells should have been ringing. She told me in the comment that she didn't feel it was her place to intervene, and that back then there was no referral system in place. Nowadays, although there is a referral system, it's all discretionary. That means it's optional. That means there's no legal duty to report, with professionals unsure of what their responsibilities actually are. Mandatory reporting would help professionals to understand their responsibilities clearly so that they needn't worry about being called out as a whistleblower. It also helps to keep children safe by ensuring that cases of abuse are reported appropriately. I know now that many of the years of abuse that I suffered as a child could have been prevented if my teacher or somebody else had not only noticed the signs but also acted by reporting to a local authority. Are professionals just encouraged to report abuse, or is there a legal obligation to do so? Until organisations who work with children are properly held to account for failing to report abuse, more abuse cases can be enabled to continue by a child protection system that ultimately places organisational reputation above the safety of kids.